Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the Arizona Cardinals 2024 offseason. Going to go over all the departures, acquisitions, review their draft picks, and at the very end of the video, we're going to go over the 2024 schedule and give our record predictions. But before we do that, if you have not already, go ahead, like, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notified when new videos come out. We have videos coming out Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and when the season starts, we're going to be doing a prediction video for every single Cardinals game. So you're going to want to ring that bell to get notified when we drop new videos. And so, Ryan, let's pull this up here. So these are the 2023 offensive and defensive team rankings for the Arizona Cardinals. And I'll just say this right now. I know the Cardinals, their record, like a clear best example of like a rebuilding team. They're one of the most fun teams to watch, in my opinion, last year, because you had a bunch of young rookies coming in. Then you had some old school, some journeyman veterans trying to make the roster for next year. And they played so freaking hard for Jonathan Gannon. They were so much more fun to watch than like the Washington Commanders and the Carolina Panthers, because the Carolina Panthers just had a talent issue. There's some talent on this team, and they've even improved a lot. And I think we can be surprised too if Kyler Murray then also keeps taking the right steps. I think being out of that Cliff Kingsbury offensive system is going to help out a lot. And so we're going to get that here in a second. But I'll say it right, the Cardinals were one of my favorite teams to watch last year just because they tried so freaking hard and they seemed like they got a lot better and better. One of their issues, though, was this defensive side of the ball. I think Jonathan Gannon's going to the great defensive mind that he was up in Philly. Didn't have really the personnel last year. And so I think they've made some improvements there. But that's the thing that really stuck out to me is like it's not surprising to me that they were one of the top rushing teams with how good James Conner is, and even too when Kyler Murray came in and he had some nice rushing stats as well. I think offensively they played okay. Even Josh Dobbs, when he was there, like he got traded to Minnesota because they needed a quarterback and he was doing so well, so they decided to give him an opportunity. He started to dip off a little bit, but before that trade. But defensively, though, they just couldn't really contain any teams.
Yeah, and that to me, I think they really need to improve on here in 2024. This offense, I think they lost DeAndre Hopkins last offseason. They struggled, I think, with some routine plays. I think they still had their fair share of explosive plays. But offensively, I think getting Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Michael Wilson as well. I think both of those guys are going to be solid receivers for you. So really this defensive side of the ball is going to, I think, be the one to have to hold up their end of the bargain. And the big thing is just getting beefier up front. You looked 32nd against the run this year, giving up a little over 2,400 rushing yards. It really killed them. And one of the things I will say, these corners probably really didn't get tested too much because at times this offense was inconsistent and teams were just kind of able to run the ball all over them, that they really weren't pushing the ball down the field a ton. This wasn't one of the better pass rushes in the league, only having 33 sacks last year, which ranked 30th. And they really didn't generate a whole lot of turnovers, averaging one a game and ending up at 27th. I will say, like, one turnover a game is good. I just think there was some sloppier play in 2023 that other teams took advantage of. So like the disparity between the top teams and I think like some of the lower teams is wider, but the average is probably still around maybe like 1.5 turnovers per game. So I don't think they're too far off in that aspect of things.
Just in general, they just struggled on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as talented. The defensive line struggled a little bit, and they made some improvements there as well with some free agent signings and also in the draft. But let's move on, though, to the departures. And so these are from over the cap as well, so the departures and the people who are still free agents. So many of these have been updated recently, or if we miss anybody, let us know in the comments. But the biggest thing that kind of reached out to me is just moving on from Hollywood Brown and Rondell Moore. As well. You did lose Antonio Hamilton also as a cornerback, but I'm not too concerned about that based off what they've done in adding and also in the draft as well. But still, when you lose two receivers as well, we'll get that here in a second, there's still some concern. But going and getting Marvin Harrison Jr., I think more than replaces both of their production overall. In general, though, I don't see anything here that is too concerning. Like DJ Humphries, he unfortunately had a pretty serious injury at the end of the season. But you got Paris Johnson for a reason in 2023. Like, you traded up to go and get him, and he had a good rookie season. So you slot him in there. And then they added another tackle that we'll address here in a second, to kind of fill out that offensive line and replace him at right tackle. So I think that's absolutely fine. What are your kind of thoughts overall just by looking at this list here?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys that aged out. Hollywood Brown, I think they wanted to move in a different direction from as well. Rondale Moore struggled with injuries and hadn't really panned out in his full time there yet. I think they also traded him to the Falcons, right? So they got pieces back for him.
Yeah, they got
Desmond Ridder walk, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, they got Desmond Ridder.
And so, like, they didn't really lose. Okay. They didn't really lose a whole lot in this offseason. And so that's where I am kind of excited to see them kind of continue to build and go forward. So not a whole lot to talk about on this slide. However, on the next one, that is not the case. So starting things off on the offensive side of the ball, Desmond Ridder, DJ Dallas, Zay Jones, Chris Moore, Jonah Williams is that tackle you were referencing, and then Evan Brown getting a center to address the interior of that offensive line there as well. I think that is just a good group there. Desmond Ridder can be your backup quarterback. You get a rotational guy and kick returner in DJ Dallas. Zay Jones and Chris Moore can be your wide receivers 3 and 4 as well. And then Jonah Williams and Evan Brown addressing the depth along that offensive line. And maybe Jonah Williams was a left tackle, but he couldn't stay healthy. He did switch over to right tackle in his last season or two with the Bengals. So he has some versatility if you want to keep Paris Johnson at right tackle and let Jonah Williams try out the left side. Just see whatever works and whatever the best 5 are that they can put out there.
Yeah. And I think, too, what we're talking about as well, the defense side of the ball. But, again, Justin Jones, Ball Nichols, and Kairos Tonga. And so not any guys are going to be world beaters, but still provide a lot of good minutes for their previous teams. I think even, too, going to get a guy like Sean Murphy-Bunting as well to help out that secondary. Replace Antonio Hamilton, who started in 9 games, only played in 14. Hamilton did, but I think Sean Murphy-Bunting can come in and provide a lot more serious minutes. And we're going to get into the depth charts here in a second. But in general, I think free agent signings, I already kind of like the direction that they're going. But then you go look at the draft picks. I do like the draft that they had here. They had, I think, is that 2, 4, 6, 8 picks in the top 104. And I think they did a good job spreading everything out and getting good talent, I think, at each position. But particularly, I think just those first 4 picks. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., I think you got Darius Robinson, who's going to come in. He's slided defensive tackle there. I think he's going to be a super big edge rusher or could even slide in a little bit on the interior, depending on the type of defense that they want to do. But Max Melton, maybe a little high for him from our depth, from our projections, but still a really good corner. And then Trey Benson, your clear replacement to James Conner after this season as well. So I think this is going to be a good running back tandem for this team this year. But so I think you combine that, then the other people that they added as well in this draft, I think they did a good job this offseason in just improving this team and getting better talent as well. It's also, too, as well, it's kind of hard to not improve based on where the team was at the start of last year to now. And so, but they're taking the steps in the right direction.
No, I definitely agree with that. The one thing, I wasn't in love with the Darius Robinson or the Max Melton pick. I understand the fits. I just wish they would have. There were definitely more superior corners on the board at 27. I still think you could have gotten a Darius Robinson or like a Marshawn Nealand at a pick like 43, or use some of this capital to move up and get him in the early 30s. So that for me was the like my only gripe with the draft. But other than that, I think they did a really good job. Let's move on to their depth charts now. They have a lot of new pieces. So you can see Marvin Harrison Jr. slotted in at the first wide receiver spot. Michael Wilson and Zay Jones there in wide receiver 2 and 3. Chris Moore, Zach Pascal, Greg Dortch, the other 3 guys there. I am really curious. Like, they have Xavier Weaver and Tejuan Palmer that are 2 rookies as well. Can one of these guys carve out a role and potentially make this roster as the 4th or 5th or maybe even 6th wide receiver and play on special teams? That will kind of be interesting to see, because Michael Wilson, we know with his time at Stanford, struggled with injuries. Zay Jones is a good receiver. I think being a wide receiver 3 is kind of his ceiling. And so just seeing if one of these guys, young guys, can push for starting time there. The offensive line, not a whole lot of change, really. You just see Paris Johnson moving from right to left tackle, and then Jonah Williams, the veteran they signed in free agency, coming up there at that right tackle spot. And then Kyler Murray at quarterback, Trey McBride and Tip Ryman leaving that tight end room. I mean, offensively, I think they got some good depth pieces, but the big addition is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh yeah, and so that's where I'll get to that point in a second. I'm curious how the offensive line does shake up. This probably will be the starting offensive line here, but just seeing how some of the rookies and seeing if there's any development or anybody could potentially work their way into the starting lineup, especially on the interior. I think the exterior is set. I think the tackles are pretty much set. But
yeah,
to Marvin Harrison Jr., like he already makes that receiving room that much better. But I'll say a concern though that I have, and this is one of the concerns of just a rebuilding team, is I still think that there's not too much else really behind him. It's like I know you have Michael Wilson coming into his second year. How is he going to end up doing? And if Marvin Harrison Jr. being on the field is going to help out his production, Zay Jones is going to be a great complement role player, but how much additional value can he be? Maybe he benefits also from the greatness of Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think there's still some question marks around their capability, especially then too depth-wise after that if we go to the second string as well. It's going to be one of the issues of, just a rebuilding team. That being said, I do like Trey McBride. I do like the running back tandem of James Conner and Trey Benson. So maybe they'll really focus on those 4 key weapons, and then whatever they get from the other guys as well, I think will also play part of it. But just to kind of, and I'm just want to reconfirm this here. So like Michael Wilson, 565 receiving yards last year through 13 games. And so maybe if he played a full season, he'd get up to 700, 750, which is pretty good, actually, I'd say, for a number 2 receiver. But hopefully, I think in this type of offense, especially too with Kyler Murray being the QB and how elusive he can be and how kind of, I would say, dynamic he can be as a quarterback, there is a possibility that if you get the right receiver in there, you can have 2 1,000-yard receivers, and maybe even and potentially even 2, 3 if you include Trey McBride. Like I think it can be that dynamic, especially with how well they can run the ball. So be curious to see how they can go and how this offense develops, because they're still in that rebuilding process as well. But I think they're going to be fun to watch. They're definitely going to play in some shootout games, just with Kyler Murray being back there and his ability with Marvin Harrison Jr. as the receiver. I think the biggest thing to me is just going to be interesting how this defense forms together. And so, as we've seen as well, Darius Robinson, he's slotting in there as a defensive end. And so, but then they got Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones to the free agents. They got Kairos Tunga, who's on the second string as of right now. But then seeing then as well how the rest of the lineup shapes up, how does Max Melton end up doing, Sean Murphy-Bunting? There's a lot of rookies right now that are second string. So just how is the secondary going to shape up? And I think seeing that battle is going to be fascinating, just how the defensive line starts to form together and how much they improved from last year, which once again, it can't really get much worse. And then to the secondary as well, as can they be more effective in applying more pressure, maybe create a little bit more turnovers, especially then too, thanks to the improved offensive line. I think that kind of how the defensive line and secondary gel together is going to be interesting to watch throughout the 2024 season.
Yeah, I really am interested to see what Jonathan Gannon can do, because as I said, I had some questions about like the draft and just like where they took players on our board. They were just a little lower than where they were taken. But with that being said, there are definitely like good attributes about both of Darius Robinson and Max Melton. So I'm really curious to see what Jonathan Gannon can do with this defense and kind of what he can scheme up. And if they can improve, I think that this could be a good team in 2024. I don't necessarily know if they're going to be quite a playoff contender, but with that being said, like I don't think I'm going to temper expectations here. I don't think they will be at the absolute bottom of the league. It kind of how like where they were close to that last year. So let's get into their schedule here. pretty rough start, in my opinion. You have to go at Buffalo, then you have the Rams in your first division matchup, then Detroit at home. You host Washington, their first winnable, well, should win game of the year, and then you have at San Francisco and at Green Bay in your first 6 games. And this, especially for a young team who a lot of these guys are going to be coming into the league, haven't really figured out how to win in these like super competitive games. I think this is going to be a little bit of a shock for this team. I think they're going to start out 1-5 in these first 6 games. Just that's a tough open for them.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be tough. I think. I mean, you had a couple division games in there, but even two, they're going to be against the 2 better teams in the NFC West. Maybe they could sneak out one. It's going to be early on in the season, but at best 3-3, and that's like best case scenario. But 2-4, I think they would gladly take a 1-5. I think going into the rest of the season, it's probably going to be the most likely situation. That being said, though, too, kind of as we move into this next section here, though, I mean, Kyler Murray is going to be the quarterback here, compared to what they had last year, where I think the first 11 or 12 games, like he was not the quarterback and he wasn't playing with them. But as the season even went on, when did Kyler Murray? So 8 games in. So week 9, week 10, he came back in. That week 9 was the Clayton Tune game, RIP. And so to his football career. Man, your first football game on the worst team in the NFL, and then you had to go up against Myles Garrett. that had to be a rough.
Yeah.
Good news, bad news, Clayton. Anyways, but so they're coming out. Oh yeah, that Falcons game, that was his first game back. And so even then too, they went 3-5 during that stretch, and even to a couple of those games as well were like they almost beat Houston the following week after they beat Atlanta. They almost beat Seattle in week 18. They were close with San Francisco. It was a shootout, and this is one of the issues with their defenses. So I think that they're going to be a little bit more competitive during these games and potentially can go 2-4. But then I bring all that up because then you go in this middle chunk of the section here of their season. So Chargers at home, that's a very winnable game. At Miami, that's going to be a tough matchup, but I mean they're going to be improved, so to say, but still probably Miami. Bears, don't know how they're going to be. Probably still going to be the Bears. Jets, probably still the Jets as well. But Seattle, Minnesota, Seattle, and even too, I'll skip over a little bit to the final 4 games with the New England. I mean, that's a good stretch of games as well. And I think they can kind of maybe go on a run, so they can pick off a couple games early. They'll probably still be sub 500, kind of through that stretch, but still, I think they can be. I think they can be a 6-9. Maybe a 7-8, kind of going in those final couple of games to end the season.
Yeah, and I agree. I had them go 5-1. I had them this was probably the hardest team for me to do because I look at this roster and I like this defense is pretty bare, not a lot of stars. Like this offense outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't have a lot of true playmakers. They just played really hard. They played as a team and they were competitive in a lot of games last year. So I look at these and like, I think potentially they could go 500 through this second part of the stretch. But I guess this is just a good segue into our predictions here. So I actually had them at 5-12. To me, the disparity between the really good teams and the bad teams is pretty extreme this year. There were not a lot of like straight 500 teams, which is probably wrong. I feel like it'll end up everybody more kind of in the middle rather than everybody on 2 ends. Especially when you have teams like Arizona that could beat anybody on any given Sunday. They have a tough start, a lot of young players who are going to be kind of finding their way in this league. And I struggle to give them the nod in a lot of close matchups where they're just not going to be quite experienced enough to win.
Yeah, and it's I understand that. I also I gave them a losing record as well. But the reason why I have a little more faith, I think, with the way that they fought under Jonathan Gannon, the way that he game planned as well. I think also Kyler Murray coming back and now he'll have a full offseason healthy, then a full season then to go and play. I think they're going to have better performances overall, especially too as the season goes on and they can kind of get into a rhythm. I think they improved enough on the defensive line and the secondary as well to be more competitive defensively. And I think even in these division games, I think they can give teams like San Francisco and the Rams more of a fight just because it won't be as easy just to walk all over them. And also on top of that, I know I made those concerns earlier about the receiving room, but that was more as a whole. Marvin Harrison Jr. is already a better receiver than both Rondale Moore and Hollywood Brown combined. And so now you go put Kyler Murray back there. How their offensive line has slightly improved as well, I would say. And they were one of the top rushing teams last year, and James Conner even missed 4 games. And so you put Kyler Murray back there with James Conner / Trey Benson. I think that this offense, I think it's going to be a tough team to play against. And Trey McBride as well, I think, is an underrated tight end. It is going to be kind of, if you're the opposing defense, kind of pick your poison. Like, we're going to have to double team Marvin Harrison Jr. most likely. And so then that is going to make guys like if Michael Wilson can develop, if Zay Jones can be that good, consistent number 2, number 3 receiver, like how we saw down in Jacksonville, like more of just a role player, but still he can go and get his numbers. There's going to be opportunities for all these guys to succeed. And so I think there's going to be an opportunity. Maybe 8 and 9 is a little high. Maybe 7 and 10 might be more accurate, but I don't think they're going to be 5 and 12. Yeah. I think they can have a good chance to be picking outside of the top 10 come the 2025 NFL draft.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think went into my prediction is I had them with a rough start. That's a really tough start to open. And starting out 1 and 5, it's kind of, I guess it just kind of spiraled from there. And even so, what is that? They would be 4 and 8 in their next, or 4 and 7 the rest of the way. So like that is well below 500, but that's not, to me, completely out of the realm of possibility, especially after a start like that. You got to think if they have a start like that, they're probably sellers at the trade deadline again. So that's kind of the.
Well, and those games are so tough to predict though with a team like that, because even last year, their one game that they won before Kyler Murray came back was they beat Dallas of all teams, the team that arguably had the best offense last year, and they held them to like 16 14. Points. Like
16,
and so of course that was the week that Trayvon
Diggs got hurt
towards ACL, but it's still a second a cornerback guy. No matter how good the guy is, he has nothing to do with the offensive side of the ball putting up 16 points. And so I think early on there's going to be those things as well, those performances of these really good teams still maybe trying to get into a rhythm. Like if we go and look at it, like I have to see how Detroit bounces back. Maybe Buffalo is still trying to figure things out, because at the same time as well, they're going to have the other interesting issue as just their receiving room. Like who's going to be that guy that steps up?
I was just about to say Buffalo under Josh Allen and Sean McDermott have notoriously started really badly, and like that could be a potential like steal game there at Buffalo.
Potentially, it's all speculative now at this point. But these guys are all still professionals, like still from the very best to the very worst in the NFL. It's still very, very close. So on any given Sunday, as you said, these guys can win. So it's going to be fun to watch. They're still going to be one of my favorite teams to watch because I really just respected the way that they fought compared to Washington last year. And I don't really blame the players nearly as much. I think everybody knew that Ron Rivera and that whole coaching staff, I think, had kind of given up. But they were just borderline pathetic to watch because, like, as soon as they got down, it's like, okay, like nobody's going to do a play. While the Cardinals were like, no, like every snap they were going to go out and play. They're going to give it their hardest, and it was fun to watch. Like it was good. It was good to see them have to try and figure out a win and to struggle, I guess, but try and put the pieces together to build a good franchise team.
Yeah, no, I agree. The one thing with the Commanders that was frustrating, they were like 4-4 at the trade deadline selling. Like they were a 500 team selling. So that was just interesting there. But anyways, let's go ahead and wrap up this video. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the Arizona Cardinals 2024 offseason. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And other than that, we will see you guys next time.